What's good, people? I'm Kinell, and this is Sinister Cinema, where we get deep into the guts of the stranger side of cinema. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to drop us a little like, give us a subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know when we got new things dropping. Leave us a comment, it all helps with the algorithm and all that kind of thing. If you're listening on an audio platform like Spotify or Apple Music, why not drop us a 5-star review? It's just for algorithm reasons. I don't care if you slag me off in the actual review, but drop us 5 stars and that helps boost us. Anyway, this is Sinister Cinema, on with this show. Yes, people, Kinell Sinister Cinema is brought to you by Forgotten Sons Apparel. Forgotten Sons Apparel is a York-based streetwear brand drawing inspiration from alternative culture, tattoos, film, classic TV and cartoons from our childhood. In their own words, if you like our stuff half as much as we do, then we like it twice as much as you. I've got a lot of love for Forgotten Sons Apparel. They've been supporting me since way before I was doing this. They were supporting me in my battle rap career. You might have seen me rocking some of their garms in battles on Don't Flop and other leagues. I'm delighted to have them as a sponsor for Kinell Sinister Cinema, and I'm encouraging you all to check out their ish at forgottensonsapparel.bigcartel.com. Safe. Hey, what's good? Okay, first of all, before we get into this, if you are watching this within 48 hours of it dropping, which should be on the 3rd of March, Thursday, if you are in London or anywhere near Shepherd's Bush or capable of getting there, you can watch me live on Don't Flop, where I'll be battling Just Trev, the Escape in Shepherd's Bush. There's also Bowski and Orwin and Frosty Jack versus McCoy in the a cappella battles. And we got some on-beat battles between Caesar and Impact, the return of Seuss and Trickster, and Swifts versus Type R. Yeah, if you hit up don'tfloptickets.com, you can cop £5 advance or 2 for £8. It'll be more on the door. But yes, Mr Parsley.
Hello, how you doing?
How's it going, lad?
It's not bad, you know. Not bad at all.
Hey, safe, brilliant. We're going to be talking today about 70s exploitation films.
Yes, specifically blaxploitation films, really.
Yeah. I've kind of gone another way with it.
Okay.
But that's what I do. Is like I like to bring in guests who have a different take on things.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're the boss, so fire away.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, to get into why we're doing it, 70s exploitation is kind of like a really interesting time in cinema for me. This is when we get the birth of the grindhouse. We get like lots of independent productions because, you know, there's smaller film companies that aren't necessarily Hollywood based, making smaller independent productions, trying to get them into the drive-ins, into the grindhouses, all them type of places there.
Absolutely.
So, and obviously they're competing with Hollywood. So that's why we get the exploitation genre, where, well, it's more than a genre. It's essentially like an attitude to filmmaking, really.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Because, like, really, you're trying to say things that Hollywood isn't saying. You're trying to show things that Hollywood isn't showing. And that's your selling point. That's what you're creating.
Absolutely. And, of course, the studio system in Hollywood, a lot of the things you might want to put in a movie, they're not going to put in a movie.
Exactly. So, you know, we're getting these lower budget productions, but they have greater freedoms in what they're doing.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
I'm a very big fan of the look of like 70s, like cheaper movies. There's something about that gritty quality that they've got.
Definitely.
It's like almost like old newsreel footage.
It is. That's one of the appeals of it for me, though, is that kind of almost museum quality of, you know, you'll get a film like Across 110th Street, which is set entirely in Harlem. And so you get to see what Harlem was like in 1971 or whatever. And that kind of stuff really does fascinate me. I love to see all the old stuff going on.
Yeah, Across 110th Street, incredible film and incredible soundtrack and all, which is something that a lot of more underground productions did. I think it was kind of like sort of when we look at like Sweetback's badass song, like he's thinking, how can I sell this independent movie? So music. So works with Earth, Wind and Fire and that. So
that's right. Well, he put the album out before he'd finished the film to get the money to finish the film.
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible, and it was through soul and funk music that I actually came to the blaxploitation genre.
Ah, that's interesting. That's interesting.
I was getting into George Clinton, Parliament, Funkadelic, P-Funk stuff, and of course all of the artists around that kind of area kind of led me into these movies, which I'd always enjoyed watching. Do you remember in the old days you'd put on BBC One on Saturday night, there'd be an old film on late at night?
Yeah.
You don't get it anymore, do you?
Yeah, now everything's like designated film channels and that.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was things like seeing Shaft or Across 110th Street very late at night that, you know, I was carrying that memory with me of enjoying those, and just decided to go exploring and see what I could find in the genre, and it's been quite the wild ride.
Wow, that's brilliant. Like, as I say, you used to run a blaxploitation blog, I believe.
Yeah, back in the day it was called Black Pudding.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's one of the tropes about blaxploitation movies is that you had Black Frankenstein or Blackenstein.
Yeah.
You had Blackula.
Yeah.
Black Shampoo.
Yeah.
My favourite parody one is from Family Guy, Black to the Future. And I was trying to think of another variety on that, and I do like a bit of black pudding, as you can see. So yeah, I used to watch 2 movies a week and write about them in this blog.
Oh, fantastic. So your selections are going to be kind of like skewed more towards that way, and my selections are going to be kind of skewed more towards my biases. My interests are in like horror and that, but there's a lot going on that falls into this exploitation category that really exploded in the 80s. So I think there's a lot to talk about.
Definitely.
Okay. So should we kick it off with your first selection then?
I think first selection. In fact, I've got a copy with me. How prepared is that?
Oh,
it's got to be the one and only Coffee.
Oh, fantastic. Incredible work with the legendary Pam Grier.
Oh, who's absolutely fantastic. So this really was the first of the big blaxploitation movies that she made.
Yeah.
With the director Jack Hill for American International Pictures. Now, I'm betting if you're doing exploitation, you'll be doing loads of AIP stuff, won't you?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got some AIP in the mix, because obviously Roger Corman was a lot to do with that.
Of course, yeah. They were very good at sort of picking up on the trends beneath where the studios were. And getting the stuff out. So once they realised there was a market for black focused pictures, they went all out on that. So you've got Pam Grier in this. Basically, she's a nurse, just an ordinary nurse with a lovely boyfriend, and this girl's sister is addicted to smack and eventually dies with it. So Coffee decides she's going to track down the people responsible with a gun. She joins a stable of prostitutes, pretending to be a Jamaican to get close to the local crime boss, and it all kind of kicks off from there, really.
Yeah, incredible piece of work, like, and quite influential and all.
Definitely so. I mean, although, you know, blaxploitation really, you mentioned Sweet Sweetback before. I think that was 68, and that was kind of the start of it then. Coffee, you're getting to about 1971, 72. People are really sort of getting into a groove with making the films as much as anything. So, and so many actors as well, Kinell. Mainstream guys that you know, people like Yaphet Kotto, who was Mr. Big in Live and Let Die, which in itself is a blaxploitation Bond.
It's certainly got all the voodoo stuff going on, like
definitely
not particularly the cultural handling of the stuff, like not particularly culturally sensitive. It wasn't at the time, but it is what it is. Like, but it's interesting to see a James Bond film like taking on that kind of approach. Yeah,
I mean, one of the other films I'll talk about a little later was an attempt at making a black James Bond, which was around about the same time as that. But yeah, you've got guys like that who go in there. Nichelle Nichols, who's of course famous from Star Trek. She plays a prostitute's madam in another Pam Grier movie. And Billy D. Williams, Lando Calrissian.
Oh yeah.
He's in a bunch of them as well. So I always get a little cheered when they turn up in these films. But of course, it's cheaply made. It's violent. It's bloody. It's sweary. As you say, not particularly culturally sensitive, but very much of its time on that kind of score. And all of these films are very much like that.
Yeah. Very much so, yeah. Coffee, fantastic piece of work. I'm glad we're kicking off with Pam Grier and all that. It really needs to be acknowledged how much of a legend she is.
Well, of course, and Tarantino brought her back for Jackie Brown, which was his tribute to blaxploitation films. And yeah, I mean, she's appeared in hundreds of the things, and she still works today. But with more clothes on than she has in coffee.
Indeed, indeed. I do kind of feel like she was a bit done dirty by the Hollywood system after Jackie Brown, because she proved that she can carry a blockbuster picture, like a couple of years down the line, and she's in John Carpenter's Ghost from Mars. Like, nah, I quite like that film actually, but I do think Pam deserved a bit better. Like,
yeah, I think because Tarantino was such a unique talent at the time and was able to bring performances out from people like that. The studio system doesn't know what to do with a middle-aged black actress.
Yeah, very true.
You know, unless it's a supporting role, or somebody's mum or something like that. That you know, and it's a real shame.
You know, something that's like heavily tropey, like the oh no you didn't black friend, or
talking to the hand and all that kind of stuff.
Which is an incredible shame, because she definitely deserves better.
Oh, absolutely. And so many, there were so many great female blaxploitation stars, who you never saw again. One of the films I'll talk about a little later, called Velvet Smooth. Now the star of that came from nowhere, did a great job in that, and then disappeared again.
Yeah. I don't know, like that's the thing. I think a lot of them, like, because there was a lot of it coming out in New York, really, wasn't there? Like, you know, right?
Yeah.
And like, I think a lot of it was people who'd be involved in like theatre that weren't necessarily film actors, but did have like experience and chops. So like, and kind of the blaxploitation movement was kind of like the only time they really got to dip their toes in that water.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, when you say about New York, Harlem was very much the centre of all that kind of thing. I was there around about 15 years or so ago, before they really started gentrifying the place. And it was wonderful to have sat and watched films like this. And to go and to go to the Apollo Theatre, and just to walk the streets out towards the barrios and stuff like that, you know. And it was, again, in the middle of my period of really getting into these films. I had a holiday in New York. Everybody thought I was nuts going there on my own.
Flipping that it was a very different place about 15 years
ago.
Yeah,
very much so. Very much so. As I say, we went to the Apollo Theatre. I asked, I wanted to go to one of those gospel church places. You know, I'm not particularly a believer, but, you know, I know that they're an amazing experience. Somebody sent me in the wrong direction. And that's how I ended up walking all the way across to East Harlem. Sat down to have a cigarette on a bench next to a van that had Kill Whitey painted on it. And I thought,
excellent.
You know, I'm not a threatening looking guy, but I thought I'll best find another bench.
That's one of those. Flipping, I've only been to New York once, and I was smashed the whole time. You can catch the results of when I was in New York. Kinell versus Non-John I battle. When I battled someone in the basement of a really good restaurant in Flatbush.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
did you win?
Yeah.
Good man.
Bodied it.
Good man.
I does this. And you can check. You can watch me win again.
I'm going to watch it when I get home.
Hey, safe. Brilliant. Okay. I suppose we better move on though. So I'm going to pull out my first selection, which is Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes.
Oh.
Incredible piece of work. It's the second film that we know about from Wes Craven, because he was doing a bit of pornography under a pseudonym before he did his first official film, which was Last House on the Left.
What was the pseudonym, by the way, Kinell?
I'm not sure.
I didn't mean to catch you out there.
I'm not sure.
Long Dong Silver or something like that.
It was something ridiculous anyway. But yeah, he originally did Last House on the Left, which is his take on Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring. And it's a brutal movie. It's a one of these rape revenge films, which is something that I feel I should mention, even though I haven't got one, because that was a big part of the exploitation thing, the rape revenge genre.
Absolutely, and very much with the black movies as well. That was a thread that ran through a lot of those.
Yeah, but like Last House on the Left, I feel the reason why I haven't included that one is because, and I don't consider it one of the films that deals with this particularly well, is because of the soundtrack.
Right.
Like, David Hess was in the film as one of the rapists, and And I don't know if it was part of the deal for getting him on as an actor, but they got him to do the soundtrack, and it's very banjo and kazoo heavy. I'm sorry, you can have a rape scene in a film, or you can have a flipping kazoo solo. You can't have both.
I was going to say
it's not. It's so upbeat and all like ring ding 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 ding. We're gonna rape some kids. He's singing songs about the flipping about what's actually going on in the
Yeah, probably best skipping over that one then.
With the upbeat banjo and so I do think like that was a bit of a misfire, you know, compared to I Spit on Your Grave, which is a very powerful movie, but they've got the use of like the diegetic sound in that. There's like no soundtrack in that thing, and it's kind of like being reclaimed, in some quarters. I know some people who've been through some horrific things that find that film quite cathartic, and it's because of its uncompromising approach to what is a very difficult subject.
Sure.
Because it doesn't have any fucking banjos in it.
Well, that always helps. And these were the films that when I was a kid, were getting banned left, right, and centre as video nasties, weren't they?
Yeah, the video nasties, like flipping, like I saw both of them through tape trading, like because that was what you had to do to get it.
Of course, yeah.
But I'm going to pull it back to the film I actually meant to talk about in the first place, with The Hills Have Eyes. Fantastic piece of work, kind of like very much a post Texas Chainsaw Massacre effort. It's the story of a family who become isolated in a desert on the way to California and find themselves being preyed on by some local cannibals, like effectively local cave people, who are very brutal and ingenious people with a lot of ingenuity to them. Like. So, and this family, they're not warriors, they're just a normal family. So it's quite an intense situation to be there in, and they're sort of forced to develop these survival instincts as they're picked off by these, like, it's almost tempting to call them like creatures or mutants, but really it's just like hill folk, really.
This is the very distinctive looking bald white guy, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'm thinking of
Michael Berryman,
yes, of course,
who played Pluto. Like you'd recognise him from everything. He's an incredible genre actor. Like he's been in a lot of stuff. Like definitely plays to his looks. But yeah, Hills Have Eyes. Like this is one I first saw on like what would have been a heavily edited VHS copy.
Yeah, it threw all the snow on the screen.
Yeah. And it still held its power then, like, and like rewatching today, it's just an incredible piece of work. The remake was pretty good and all. And like, I've got to give a shout out to the sequel, Hills Have Eyes Part 2.
Right.
To the sequel to the original one, just because of how much of a mental film it is. See, it was kind of like a contractual obligation film. And like, because just as they were sort of going into production with it, Wes Craven, the money came through for the film that he actually wanted to make, which was A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
So he didn't really want to make Hills Have Eyes 2, so he tried to make like a film in the quickest way he could. And the resulting film is absolutely ridiculous. Like every character gets a flashback in it. And like it gets to a point when they run out of like survivors from the first film to have flashbacks. So the dog from the first film gets a flashback. Honestly,
wow.
The camera zooms in on the full Wayne's World, and he flashes back to this dog's like most treasured memory of like a couple of guys he bit in 1974.
Fantastic.
Yeah, an incredible.
There should be more movies like that.
Yeah. It's kind of like the whole Silent Night, Deadly Night situation.
Right.
Like the part 2 of that is like the first 40 minutes of Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 are a highlight reel of Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 with some voiceover.
I mean, that's how you can fill it. There's a very similar situation with in the blaxploitation world. There's a film called, and it's do you know what? It's gone completely out of my head. But basically, it's the story of a black godfather in Harlem. Yeah. The end of the first film, he gets shot by a kid, and he's dying in the rubble. Yeah. At the start of the second film, you get the last 6 minutes of the first movie, and then he gets up and walks away and causes hell up in Harlem.
Yes. See, there it is. That's independent filmmaking. It's like using everything that you can reuse, including bits of the film you shot last time. Like, okay, safe. But yeah, Hills Have Eyes, that's a personal favourite for me. Like, I rewatched it yesterday. Still holds its power. I will say the remake, probably a better jumping on point, because the first one has aged to some degree. And but it hits a bit different with me because, like, I love that film so much. I got that emotional attachment to it. But if you're used to more modern films, you might be better off hitting the remake, which is still a banger. And brings in interesting theories about how communities were affected by nuclear testing and so forth. Which is pretty relevant these days because,
might be us next, the way things are going.
We're going to be dealing with the bombs, lads.
Oh,
it's not going to be pretty. L's, G's and NB's, head for the bunker. Okay, and on that note, how's about hitting us with your number 4 selection?
Oh, well, my number 4 selection, I was chosen it especially because I knew I'd be sat here talking to you. Right, this is Rudy Ray Moore's movie, Dolomite.
Oh, yes. One of the most heavily sampled, movies around, like, flipping like the Beastie Boys has sampled it. Rudy Ray Moore himself has appeared on, like, Dr. Dre's records. Snoop Dogg, he's done work with Eazy-E and all this, like, incredibly influential on the rap community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, a lot of people will count him as one of the godfathers of modern rap.
Yeah.
Because he was known, as Rudy Ray Moore, he was known for toasting.
The sort of which evolved out of the Jamaican style of toasting, like which would be incorporated by sound system DJs and eventually become what we know as rap. This was like very much a precursor to the birth of hip hop.
Definitely.
I'd say between like Dolomite, Jamaica in general, and the Last Poets and things like that. Those are your cornerstones that needed to exist in order for hip-hop to be born.
Absolutely. So he would, and he brings this into the film as well. He'll do, he performed, one of his toasts was called The Signifying Monkey.
Yes.
So The Signifying Monkey is in there. And I've made some notes on here because I'm trying to be professional for you. The other one, Shine and the Great Titanic, where you've got the black waiter on board the Titanic trying to tell everybody that it's sinking. The film itself is appalling. I mean, we're talking sub-Ed Wood quality movie here.
I still love it though.
Oh, it's great.
I got to be real. Like,
I mean, that's the reason why it's great with the shit kung fu.
Yeah.
And the toasting, and it seems like we were talking earlier about the Netflix movie with Eddie Murphy, which shows you the making of it. It's called My Name is Dolomite on Netflix, and it's a brilliant film. Really is a great watch. They shot it with some kids from college that they found. The closest he'd ever got to kung fu before was a bag of prawn crackers, and he's trying to do all that stuff. It's great fun. It was made for about $3. And really kick-started a new phase to the guy's career from there.
Yeah. Before that, he'd be known as like effectively like kind of a stand-up, but what he'd be doing is putting out these things called party records.
Yes.
Which were things where he'd do his toasting over a live band, like, and it'd be recorded live with a live audience. So it'd effectively be a live comedy album, but
in someone's house.
Yeah. There'd be music and rhyming and all that, like, and it's incredible to like see like where things came from. But yeah, he's incredible. Like, I'm a big fan of Rudy Ray Moore, like mainly for rap reasons. I got onto him like very young. Like, I think the first time I became really aware. I kind of like heard him from samples on the Beastie Boys and things like that. Like, the first time I like really kind of knew who he was his appearance on Dre's 2001 on the D's Nuts skit. And all that, like, but I definitely heard references like in lyrics, like, Dolomite. It's a good word to rhyme.
It is,
and all this,
and talking of rhyming, by the way, I don't think there's anybody in the world that's ever been able to rhyme as many things with the word motherfucker as Rudy Ray Moore. That's
true. He'd give Shuffle T a run for his money. Jamie Blee's like. He's rhymed a lot of words with motherfucker. They didn't really have like the tight multisyllabic approach that we have these days, but like they had the vibes, and that was what it was about then. Like,
yeah, it was almost like declaiming, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really, at the time.
Yeah.
Whereas you when you perform, you speak very much with the cadence, with the rhythm. You can see the stuff forming when you're saying it with the rhythm. Whereas with him, it was more of a learned piece, almost. But nonetheless funny or filthy for it.
Oh yeah, incredible stuff. Like, got to give a shout out to the film he made after that, which is one of my personal favourites, which is Petey Wheatstraw,
Oh
Devil's
God, yeah,
son-in-law.
Absolutely.
Yeah, flipping, like, he decided that Ridiculous was selling, and he went full on down the line with that one. He was not mucking around, like.
But no, the guy is a real hero of blaxploitation movies, and especially on that kind of do-it-yourself side of things.
Yeah.
Him and his mates, you know. There's an actor in it called D'Urberville Martin. Now, D'Urberville was a big actor. Any blaxploitation movie is in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And he managed to con him into directing this film for him. Yeah. And again, it was him and his mates around him that did it. And it really, you know, he knew his audience. He knew what people wanted to hear because he'd been selling the albums for all these years. So definitely worth a catch. Definitely worth a catch.
Okay, and I'm going to go into my number 4, and this is another AIP joint, American International Pictures. I'm going for Joe Dante's Piranha.
Oh!
Yeah, excellent piece of work, this. This one's like very much, it came in the sort of post-Jaws eco-terror wave.
Yes.
When, like, after... It pretty much follows the story beats of Jaws exactly, but a lot of films did back then. Things like Grizzly, latterly like Alligator and things like that. I think there's multiple ones involving bees. Essentially, some kind of animal is going to kill a lot of people. Someone says, usually a scientist, we should do something about that. Shut wherever this animal is hanging around.
And there's always a local mayor that says no.
Yeah. Because the town's going to make a lot of money, like, and like, you know, it's like there's not even like what should we call it, shops on the beach or whatever, like. So you're thinking, like, how's the town making that much money? They're just jumping in the water
and getting eaten when they do.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But yeah, those are the Jaws beats, but they transferred over to Piranha, which is obviously produced by Roger Corman. So we get a bit more. It's a bit sleazier on the exploitation level. We get a lot of like women paddling, bum shots, this kind of thing, like, and it's about mutant killer piranhas, possibly something to do with army experimentation, that have escaped into, I believe, a lake, which a lot of people are going on holiday for.
That's right.
And yes, piranhas eat people because the mayor won't shut the lake. I mean, yeah, it is a Jaws ripoff, but it's brilliant. Like, because Roger Corman had his formula locked at this point. He's coming off the back of his like Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. He's dipped his toe in science fiction. He's been around a lot of things, and he's figured out the way to do it is have your film short and punchy. You're normally like hitting around the 80-minute mark, you know, so like you're quite clipping through the story.
I have a theory, by the way, about movies.
No
movie needs to be longer than 90 minutes when it comes down to it. I've said that having sat through a lot of recent movies that are like 3 hours long.
Yeah. This is it. Like, I don't know. I think a film can carry that weight, but not everyone can. Like, I talk about it when I'm discussing battle rap. Like, I don't think people need rounds longer than 2 minutes. I mean, there should be battles with rounds longer than 2 minutes, but not everyone's good enough to be spitting longer than 2 minutes.
Oh, goodness crikey. No, you'd be putting me in for a 30-second round. Seriously, I'd be struggling with that.
But yeah, that's where we're at. So, I mean, I do feel like 90 minutes, that's the golden era for me. That's the golden area for me. Like,
yeah, definitely, because everything's put out, and of course older movies are a lot slower. There's a different use of sound. You don't get a music bed under everything that happens in older movies. So to give it that wham bam bam for 90 minutes and you come out exhausted.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like, I mean, like, and Piranha's a good example of this. It really does go on at like quite a clip. Like, and I've got to say, a lot of the effects really hold up. Like to this day, like, because it's a complicated thing to do. Like, you know, effectively like illustrate piranhas eating people. So it's done with a lot of quick cuts, fast editing, and like the blood in the water effects. Like, and this like 1970s film really holds up, so much so that when it was remade in 1995, not Piranha 3D, there was a TV movie version in 1995.
Right.
They just literally like took the effect scenes from the original. I think they did the same with Humanoids from the Deep, and they just like shot new dialogue scenes with people with like 90s haircuts, and it wasn't good.
No, it doesn't sound like it. But I mean, I'd rather see a relatively badly handmade piranha chewing someone's leg off than a badly made CGI piranha chewing someone's leg off.
Very true, very true. Like, and the piranhas got even more badly made in Piranha 2: The Spawning when they when they decided to give the piranhas the power of flight.
Okay.
Easier said than done. Like, this was actually the first film directed by James Cameron of Titanic, Terminator, Avatar, The Abyss. Like,
of course.
Yeah.
You don't get much more mainstream than James Cameron really these days, do you?
Yeah, but you start off with Piranha 2: The Spawning.
Can I ask one question? I've not seen Piranha 2: The Spawning. How do they breathe when they're flying? Is this broached, this subject at all? Or it just happens?
They just kind of go.
See, I'd be sat on the sofa poking holes in that.
Deals with it. I think the special effect like that one had a lot of Italian involvement. I should say I missed all Italian films and all kung fu films out of my list because like and all slasher films out. Well, all stalk and slash like Halloween type films out of my list because they do fall under exploitation, but I think they're all like categories on their own that I could do a full episode on like several times over.
Oh, absolutely. And there was a kung fu influence came into the films that I've been talking about today. In fact, the next one I'll choose when we move to that is pretty much a kung fu movie.
Okay. Let's roll on to that now then.
Okay. Well, it's a film called Velvet Smooth. Now, it had been a while since I watched Velvet Smooth, so I put it on last night, but I'd been at the cider.
Yes.
So I'm gonna write down exactly what I wrote because I think it sums up the film perfectly.
Hang on. As you write this, I'm just going to reach over and grab myself another tin of Estrella Dam.
Okay, my friend. Basically, Velvet Smooth was made in 1976. It starred an actress called Johnny Hill, who'd never been anything before, never been anything since. And the male lead in it was a guy called Emerson Boozer, who used to play for the New York Jets. Now, just as a very brief aside, so many former NFL players were in blaxploitation movies. You've got the likes of Jim Brown, Fred Williamson was ex-NFL.
Oh, yeah.
I've written some down here.
That's an interesting way to get like star, because I mean like these were people who went like Jim Brown and Fred Williamson. These are people that are known to current generations as actors. So it's interesting that they came in on these like low budget productions, like where how can we get some star quality if we can't afford like a full price actor? We'll give a break to
and they were big guys as well, these NFL. I guess it's the olden days equivalent. Let's say David Beckham had ended up becoming Jason Statham.
Yeah.
Okay, it was that kind of thing. So you've got NFL players like Jim Brown and Fred Williamson. Rosie Greer was another one. Pam Greer's brother was an NFL player. Loads and loads and loads of them. So, it was Emerson Boozer that was in this film, Velvet Smooth. The plot, such as it is, private eyes called in to look into a gang turf war. Loads of kung fu action in it, and nobody is who they seem at first. Everyone's got a secret. They made it for $20,000, and none of them ever appeared in another movie again.
Jeez.
I know, but this is my description of the plot of Velvet Smooth, right? Written after some cider. Punchy kung fu laundrette attack. Shoe shine, old man, murder gang wars.
Excellent.
So you've got your kung fu in the laundrette. You've got your shoe shine.
Yeah.
Every blaxploitation film needs to have a shoe shiner in it.
Of course.
And again, it basically looks like it was filmed partly in someone's front room and partly in someone's kitchen. And then they just move things around to make it look like a different place. Wow. It's cheap as chips, but again, 88 minutes long. It's so much fun to watch. It really is. And again, gives you again a sense of that place and time. Yeah,
this is one that I'm not familiar with at all. I don't know about Velvet Smooth. Like.
Well, Velvet Smooth you can see for free if you have Plex, the streaming software.
I do have the Plex app. Like, I'll have a note of that.
So take a look at that. There's quite a few of these blaxploitation movies in there, and again, some of them didn't they would go around these flea pit cinemas for a year, the grindhouse cinemas for a year on the quiet. But your average mainstream person, your average mainstream guy on the street wouldn't even know the films existed, really.
Yeah, this is it. Like they'd sort of like they'd kind of be sent around drive-ins at all. So like it's not like there'd only be so many copies of it on film to go between the different cinemas. So they'd be distributed, like, and it'd be opening, like, in one state 2 months after it came out in another state.
Absolutely, yeah, of course. No streaming, no home video at the time.
Yeah, and like I said, some of them wouldn't even get past, they wouldn't leave 42nd Street.
No, absolutely not. And occasionally you got the big breakout ones that were funded by the studio. So you've got things like Shaft, which was an MGM movie. And MGM made quite a lot of blaxploitation films because they were cheap and easy to churn out, you know. But the really, really independent ones, another one that I've not watched recently that's worth mentioning is called The Black Gestapo.
Exactly. There's a lot going on with that name itself. Like, the name alone is like...
Well, basically, it's like a proto-Guardian Angels group who get taken over by a very bad person and end up dressing in the gear and behaving like the guys. It was filmed in a...
That's insane.
It's like filmed in an elementary school playground. It's just mad stuff. It really is.
The Black Gestapo, that's absolutely nuts. Like,
yeah, you're kind of watching it like this.
I feel like, I mean, like, that sounds like spiritually closer to something like Birth of a Nation or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much it's a propaganda thing. I think it's like a cautionary tale of this is what happens if you let the wrong people take over your street gang. But yeah, I don't know what they were doing when they wrote it.
Yeah, that's insane. Like, it puts me in mind of Fight for Your Life. Now, Fight for Your Life is the... we were talking about the video nasties and censorship in the UK earlier. Now, Fight for Your Life is the only film that's been banned as part of the video nasties purely for explicit language. And it's not been released in the UK. So you can get it.
Oh, of course, online.
But yeah, it's a revenge film in itself. Like, I mean, like, this isn't one of my top 5, but it probably warrants talking about.
Okay.
Because this is something that really illustrates the whole principle of exploitation films, and like, essentially, it's a revenge film, and it concerns 3 prisoners that escape from prison. Obviously, Jesus Christ, prison van. There's a white guy, Indian guy, I believe, and a Mexican guy.
Right.
And they essentially like hold this black family hostage. And the white guy is particularly very, very racist dude, like flipping coming out with all kinds of like slurs, including like antique ones that have been out of circulation for that.
Right.
That you'd have to Google, but if you did Google, you'd get put on a list for Googling it and all this kind of thing. Don't Google them. But yeah, Fight for Your Life. And so the first half of the film is like these prisoners taking this black family hostage and making them dance, doing all this horrific stuff.
Right.
And then the second half is the family getting revenge, getting one up over on them and like sort of beating them down.
Okay.
So the black family wins. They come out triumphant.
And this was banned for language.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a very, very, very racist film.
Okay.
Because the thing is about this, I've referred to it as Fight for Your Life. The film also had a second title called Staying Alive. And there was 2 separate trailers for it. And certain, like, say, like more like traditionally white populated, like racist, effectively, you know, we're talking about the 70s, areas of the country would get the trailer for Fight for Your Life, which would just show these prisoners like flipping doing all their racism stuff.
Right.
And the second trailer was for the same film but retitled Staying Alive. And this trailer would play in more urban areas, like more black frequented cinemas. And this trailer focused on
on the second half of the movie.
Yeah, when they get the one up on them. So effectively, like, they're selling 2 completely different movies, and it's the same movie. But when it comes out, like, you know, like people from like bumfuck Texas or whatever are watching it, and they're like cheering on the racism, like as if like, you know, like,
yeah, they're seeing themselves reflected back on the screen
in the same way that you'd see you'd watch a Friday the 13th film and you're just like cheering when the teenagers get killed and that. And then flipping the Stay Alive, which is the same film, would open in the black cinemas. And they'd be like, yeah, fucking watching the racists get beat down. And like the occasional Mexican person watch and go, yes, they've actually used a Mexican they've used a Mexican actor instead of a flipping white guy in flipping heavy makeup. But yeah, I mean, like, the film itself is like, it's reprehensible. Like, there's no other way for it. But that's an example of like how they sold like the same film to 2 completely separate audiences. Like, there was no moral attempt to cater to anyone. What was happening is that they were sat down. How can we make one room, and how can we
double the money?
Yeah, one movie for a very small budget and sell it to all these people, because obviously it's mostly set in like a single room.
Of course.
So, you know, that's how, so it's like, you know, those kind of like one location pieces are a lot easier to make. You're not dealing with transport and that. So it's quite incredible. I mean, it's worth noticing, like, if you're more of a modern horror fan, like, you notice a lot of the story beats in it. In Rob Zombie's The Devil's Rejects, but he just made it like white people like harassing a white family.
Sure.
So I'm thinking, could that be the only ever acceptable case of whitewashing a remake?
I guess it could. I suppose if both halves are aimed at the same audience, it might be a black thugs going for a black family or white thugs going for a white family. Otherwise, I think these days there's just too much damage to be taken from a film like that, isn't there?
That like it's a fur coat argument. You know, it's interesting that it did exist. We probably shouldn't be making new ones. You know. Yeah.
No, I think that's very fair, because I mean, obviously, a lot of these the topics that were covered even 40 years ago now, and people will know from all the old TV shows, the comedy shows and stuff. You wouldn't be remaking them today unless you could completely rework them.
Yeah. Very true, very true. I mean, this is it. People say how things are like changed nowadays. Like, you know, we like back in the 80s, you got to remember, they were standardly like using flipping N-words with hard R's in like the young ones at 7:30 in the afternoon. Like, so like, you know, it's one of those things you say that people don't like change, but some things really did need to change. They weren't right. And like, I don't think it's fair to necessarily cast assumptions, but say like, yeah, this is some shit that we're just never going to do again. Absolutely.
But these things exist out there. And I think if you can sit and look at them from today's perspective and say, right, okay, this is how people behaved in 1973, you know, and just judge it as a piece of art on its own.
Yeah. I like the way that, like, there's been, I mean, like, we don't have it in the UK, but I think on like the Warner Brothers streaming service, they like flag up like cartoons, like old cartoons that are available with racist tropes that say like, look, this is a product of its time. It is totally unacceptable, but we don't believe in hiding it from you. But this is what it is, and this is why we've got to be better in future.
Absolutely, like, you see a lot of it on Disney Plus these days, actually. Yeah. Even though they don't put Song of the South on there. You know, even with this cartoon shows Donald Duck smoking cigarettes, because back in the day Donald Duck was all right to smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, things like that, like, and you know, there are things like that. I know, like, some people get a bit up in arms about, like, what should we call it, like when a TV show had blackface or something, and those episodes get taken away. But I fully get that, because, like, some poor actor, like, is no, you know, they might have thought they were doing the right thing at the time, and now they don't want that out there. I get taking that away, but, like, really, I think the way to go is, like, the old stuff should still be available, but we should have these warnings. You know?
I think so. I'd agree with you on that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe in censorship. I believe in information, so that everyone's going into everything with informed consent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Right. We've sidetracked there, and I've forgotten what we were on.
We were talking about the Wes Craven movie.
That was my first one. I think we did Piranha after that.
Oh, we did do Piranha after that.
So I've done 2 movies.
I'm sober, by the way.
Yeah. So I've done 2 movies. How many have you done?
I've done 2 movies so far as well.
Okay, so that makes it your turn.
Okay, well, it's another one that I've brought with. It's like show and tell at school. Look.
Yeah.
Another one that I brought with me. Isaac Hayes as Truck Turner.
Truck Turner. Like.
Okay, so the reason I've chosen this one, basically, we've got the soul music connection and the funk connection there as well.
An incredible soundtrack to this one. My mate I used to live in uni with had the album on 12-inch, and it was always one of those that I'd sneak off to my room occasionally. Like, but
no, it is a great soundtrack, and of course, once you've got somebody who's the star and providing the soundtrack for it, you're cutting your costs again with that. So basically, in this, Isaac Hayes plays a skip tracer. Which is great, because I never get to use the phrase skip tracer in real life, or bounty hunter to the likes of you and me.
I did not know what a skip tracer was. I know now.
You see, because they trace the people who skip bail.
That makes sense.
Smart. A bit like Robert Forster did in Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
The Tarantino blaxploitation movie.
Or the bounty hunter.
Yes. Yaphet Kotto from Live and Let Die is also in this one as well. Basically, the story is that he's been sent after a violent pimp who has skipped his trace, and also that this pimp's gang has killed his wife, and the final straw, they kill his cat. So he's going after them. Big time.
Oh God.
The great thing with this, and a rarity for blaxploitation movies, is there's really sharp, snappy dialogue, especially in the first half of the movie with Isaac Hayes and his sidekick, before his sidekick gets done in. But yeah, I mean, it's another MGM. It's a slightly higher budget than the independent ones, but as a standalone film, it's a great watch, and of course, an hour and a half of Isaac Hayes music on top.
Banging.
You know, this is a lover man with a pistol here.
Yeah.
People. You know, you can't get better than that, really, can you?
He is that guy.
He is. So, again, like I say, you've got Yaphet Kotto in there. You've got Nichelle Nichols, who was Lieutenant Uhura in Star Trek, who, by this time, again, much like we were saying with Pam Grier, wasn't getting the mainstream roles, really, that an actress of her talent really should have had. So she was showing up in a lot of these things. And the other actor in there that, again, very popular in blaxploitation, Scatman Crothers.
Yes.
Now, best known, I think, probably for playing the janitor in The Shining with Jack Nicholson.
Or Hong Kong Phooey.
Oh, of course, yeah. He was the voice of Hong Kong Phooey, wasn't he?
The #1 super guy.
Oh, quicker than the human eye.
Yep.
And again, you've got your whole 70s kung fu feeding into that.
Yeah.
It's everything's connected.
Yeah.
So that's my number 3. That's Truck Turner with Isaac Hayes.
Okay, number 3, and here's where I go into blaxploitation, because I'm bringing up Sugar Hill.
Oh, you've got a few lovely crossovers with that, haven't you?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, I mean, it's considered blaxploitation, but it's also a horror movie, and there's a lot going on in it. For those who aren't familiar with it, it's effectively a zombie film, but it's kind of like voodoo based.
Yes.
It kind of brings in the voodoo lore, which is interesting, because at the back end of the 60s, we get like the first zombie movies, things like White Zombie with Boris Karloff and I Walk with a Zombie, all these kind of things, they all kind of like had that kind of like Voodoo Island mythology.
Well, that's where the zombie as a trope comes from, isn't it? It comes from voodoo.
Effectively, yeah, but around about 1968, we get Night of the Living Dead, and that's when we get the sort of emergence of the modern zombie.
Yes.
And this is like more of a it's more of a science fiction thing. It's an infection. It's the dead coming back to life. There's no witch doctor. There's no ritual. There's no possession. Those elements kind of gone out of it. Sugar Hill kind of brings that back.
Yes.
I mean, it kind of like and again, in common with a lot of blaxploitation things, it's kind of a revenge plot, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're coming back for payback purposes.
That's it. And yeah, this is an incredible film. Like, I saw it when it popped up on Prime a while back, and it tends to pop up on streaming services intermittently and disappear. Like,
yeah, I mean a lot of both the exploitation and the blaxploitation films, because I think they do sell them off to streamers as great big packages, so you can always find them for free somewhere.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a bit of a quest, though. I mean, this is the problem with streaming. This is why I prefer hard copies, because my hard copy is not going to disappear.
You don't have to hunt for it on Google.
Yeah. I mean, like, or Just Watch or whatever. But the thing is, like, when something gets sold to a streaming service, it's normally sold for a year or 2 years. And streaming services tend to put things on around the time people want to watch them. For example, like Netflix put, like, at the start of last October, put Halloween 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the service. That's good. That's when you'd want to watch them. But it also means that their 12-month or 24-month contract they've got, when that expires, they're going to be taken off just as you want to watch them.
Yeah, and they'll put them on the streaming service that you're not currently paying for.
Exactly.
So when you have got your hard copy DVD in your hand, you're not subscribing to anything, are you?
That's it. Ownership.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I did with Sugar Hill.
Yeah.
You came to that through Amazon Prime then, did you?
Yeah. I kind of clicked on it because of the name. Because I believe there was a later, I think there was a 90s film called Sugar Hill also. And
of course there was a popular young person's rapping group.
Yeah.
Wasn't there?
Well, possibly the oldest person's rapping group.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
With the Sugar Hill Gang. And one of the most flagrant examples of thieving lyrics ever. Like, I mean, Big Bang Hank's iconic opening verse was stolen from a rapper called Casanova Fly.
No way. I didn't know this.
Yeah, and he literally spells his name at the start of the thing.
Oh, my God. Because wasn't it the story with the Sugar Hill Gang that it was a lady who owned the recording studios and she just pulled a couple of lads in off the street, one to play the bass line and one to do the rapping?
Effectively, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realise he'd nicked it, though.
Yeah, that was it. Like, because I mean, like, there was no real recordings of people's bars before that. Like, the block parties, you just have MCs that would come up and do their thing.
Sure.
And Casanova Fly was a particularly popular one, and I guess Big Bang Hank, was collared and asked to demonstrate his rapping ability. Just had that bar memorized, but I just can't get over like starting off a bar that involves spelling out a name that isn't yours. That's absolutely insane to me. It's insane that's the root of recorded hip hop. Like, obviously it's existed for quite some time.
You should do that in your next battle. Whoever you're battling, start off by rapping their name. That'll throw them right off.
I don't know. Funnily enough, the guy I battled in New York was a guy called Nonch, and he was battled. Before that, he was battling a few months before that, he battled a guy called Los Fidel, and it was a one-rounder, and Nonch was practicing his bars for this one-rounder outside. He was going over them over and over again, really loud, and flipping Los Fidel, was listening to him. So because it was a one-rounder, Los Fidel opted to go first and then rapped Nonch's whole round.
Oh, my God.
Before he got a chance to rap.
That's brilliant.
It is like tactically flipping incredible. Like,
Smart work. How did he come back from that then?
it didn't go well.
Excellent stuff.
Once again, I'm getting sidetracked though. I'm getting sidetracked. Yeah. So, do you want to hit us with?
So Sugar Hill was your number 3.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Well, my number 4, well, it's mid-period blaxploitation, bigger budget stuff.
Yeah.
So MGM had James Bond.
Yeah.
Paramount thought, right, it's time for a black James Bond. Yeah. So they got Fred Williamson into a movie called That Man Bolt. Okay, now it's set in Macau, it's set in Mexico, it's set in Hong Kong, it's set in Vegas. They put money into this, flying these guys around the world. They signed him for 3 Bolt movies. Yeah. In the end, they only made 1. They paid him for 2, thank goodness. But you can really tell the difference with the stunts, with the budgets, with the fights, and even the fact they put in a bit of money into the script. Lots of karate, lots of kung fu, loads of lovely girls in there. Basically, for the money they spent, again, you can't put that on the old blaxploitation grindhouse circuit. No. You know, and that's where people were going to watch their movies.
Yeah, this is where the popularity was like.
So, although the movie made money, the outlay at first was so high that they just said, we can't be asked doing any more of these. Yeah. But it really is, you know, what would happen if you made a blaxploitation movie in the 70s with a decent-sized budget.
That's incredible. Like,
yeah, and you don't see it around that much these days, but it is very much in that. Basically, you could have switched out Fred Williamson for, who was it at the time, Roger Moore, and put Fred Williamson in Live and Let Die and Roger Moore into That Man Bolt. Yeah. That's how kind of interchangeable they were. But it's definitely, the money's up on screen. It's definitely worth a watch if you can catch that one.
Yeah, That Man Bolt. That sounds like a banger. That's what I'm going to have to check.
Definitely, it's around. I've been searching the last couple of days, and you will get it on some of the streamers.
Okay, I'm definitely going to get that
for deaf. So, how about your number 2 then?
Okay, for number 2, I'm going for something extra scuzzy. I'm going for Blood-Sucking Freaks.
Blood-Sucking Freaks.
Yeah,
that sounds like my neighbours.
I hope it doesn't.
No.
This film, it was a Trauma releasing film. It was like released by Trauma. Trauma didn't make it, but it's quite an interesting one. Like, essentially, it concerns a guy who's like a magician, like with like a Grand Guignol kind of theatre show, and is a dwarf assistant. And he basically has a show where he appears to torture all these women, and the twist is, he's torturing all these women. Right. Yeah. And the sort of like B plot to it is like that a critic gets that a critic becomes comes to one of his shows, reviews it, doesn't like it, describes it as trash, and so he gets a blow dart to the neck, courtesy of the dwarf assistant Ralphus.
Serve him right.
Yeah, and he finds his way into the show, and there's also another thing going on with a ballerina who's been kidnapped, who's going to be part of the show also, and there's lots of weird like sub-dom kind of stuff going on with it. Like, there's a lot of torture in this film. There's a lot of torture and there's a lot of nakedness. But it somehow seems like kind of a bit acceptable with it, because like the noises that the women are making, they're like ooh kind of noises, rather than actual screams of terror. Like if Rob Zombie made it, like it's the kind of screams you'd hear from like something involving BDSM. So there's at least like some kind of connection there, like, right. And it involved a lot of the director who put it together. It involved a lot of like New York theatre people that were like doing like off-Broadway shit where they'd appear naked on stage, and it wasn't like that far away from like what they were actually doing. Yeah. Except, you know, they weren't getting killed and all this. And but yeah, it's an interesting little piece, and like there's a lot about it that like, it's very hard to describe a torture film as like good entertainment. The people who haven't seen it, but there's a lot of in the color schemes and the way things are put together, and like the main guy, the magician, he's got this kind of like mercurial quality to him, and the little person assistant Ralphus is just like a hilarious character. I can't remember the name of the guy who played him. It was originally supposed to be played by Hervé Villechaize.
Right, I know him. Yeah. Well, he ended up in James Bond, didn't he?
Yeah, the man with the golden gun. And what's called, he was also from Fantasy Islands.
Yeah.
And he was agreed to do this film for a deal that involved a lot of sex workers. And this other guy who played him, like, I'm going to have to Google it, but the other guy who played him just kind of walked in, and in a very, and effectively the director said, well, what's the difference between one little person and another?
Okay.
So I went with that, and hang on, I've got to find it here. But the guy who was responsible is the guy who was the dwarf had only appeared in one other thing, and it was a stag reel, which was one of the earliest forms of pornography.
Of course, yeah.
And apparently, what he lacked for in height, he made up for with a prodigious penis. It doesn't
like a kickstand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's an incredible piece of work. Another interesting thing about this is it's the favourite film of the wrestler Chris Jericho.
Okay, I'm aware of him.
Yeah, he actually based certain stuff, like his manager would wear clothes based on the colour schemes of things that what Ralphus the Dwarf was wearing. And at one point he did have a sidekick like wrestler called Ralphus, and a lot of it came from Blood-Sucking Freaks. So that's kind of interesting. Like, I don't really know wrestling myself, but he appears to be like some kind of like leading expert on this crazy film.
Yeah, I know Chris Jericho's a popular one. He's a rock musician as well.
Yeah, he's in a band called Fozzy. Like, so
they're playing in Chester in November.
I didn't know that.
That's how I knew about Chris Jericho.
I'll have to pop up, and I'll have to have a word with him about Blood-Sucking Freaks.
Yeah,
it's just this fascinating piece of post Herschel Gordon Lewis Grand Guignol, like,
right,
because like Herschel Gordon Lewis would be the sort of the godfather of this style, like what should we call it, with his films like The Wizard of Gore, all this kind of thing. Like he was the first one to do like splatter movies, and he was like a very much he was very much an early adopter of a lot of the techniques that would go on to define exploitation cinema before it was even possible to make exploitation cinema.
Yeah,
he'd do like the earliest way that you could get tits onto a cinema screen was by making like a public health films, and he was doing that before he was making his gore films, before he was making his Blood Feast and all this kind of thing.
A bit like in this country back in the day when you had to buy Health and Efficiency magazine if you wanted to see a pair of knockers.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I don't quite go far back. I don't quite go that far.
I'm not saying I do. I'm just saying I'm aware of it.
Yep. Okay. Yes.
Well, there you go.
Okay. So I think it's our final selections coming up here.
Well, do you know what? I've got my crib notes here.
Yeah.
We did Truck Turner.
Yeah.
We did Dolomite.
Yeah.
We did That Man Bolt. We did Coffee. And we did Velvet Smooth.
Yeah.
So I've done 5. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do a bit of show and tell for you with the other ones that I brought.
Cool.
Jim Brown, who's again was with the Cleveland Browns,
Yeah.
I think. He was another NFL footballer.
Yeah. Shout out Ohio. OHIO, no place like home.
He was in a film called Slaughter. That's the sequel, Slaughter's Big Rip-Off.
Yeah.
Now, that had money put into it. There's a helicopter explosion in that.
Yeah.
But again, you can see that a lot of the time they were trying to get franchises going, which never really made it beyond 1 or 2 films. Although Shaft is still an IP.
Yeah, we had Shaft's Big Score and Shaft in Africa. Like,
Yeah. And of course, the more recent Shaft, the last one was terrible. The one from 2000 wasn't so bad. But hey, you'll like this one. You can hold this one up for the camera. There's a double bill on that one.
Oh, my days.
So one of the first blaxploitation movies I ever bought was The Thing with Two Heads, with a budget of, well, a 9-year-old's pocket money, basically.
Incredible. The Thing with Two Heads, which is also a double build here with The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant.
I mean, that's right up your pipe, isn't it? That kind of thing.
I wouldn't use the term up the pipe, but yeah, certainly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, certainly somewhere along those lines. Yes.
But definitely, I mean, they touch on so many genres. The blaxploitation movies, from comical social commentary. Mario Van Peebles' second movie was called Watermelon Man. Where a white guy one day wakes up black.
Jesus.
Yeah, he's got this very orange makeup to start with, and of course it's very obvious and very in your face the kind of contrast that he has in his life from one day to the next. So there's loads. There's comedy, action stuff, horror stuff that we've done. Things like Sugar Hill. Definitely worth going and get on Wikipedia, type in blaxploitation, go check some films out.
Okay. Well, I mean, so we've obviously mixed up the order that we're going in.
We've gone all over the place today, haven't we?
Because my final film was going to be Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh.
Flipping absolutely. There's not a lot more to say about this film other than how iconic and defining it is.
Well, they're still remaking it today, aren't they?
Yeah. The new one, I saw it last week. I had a lot of fun with it. But I had a lot of fun with it because they've just completely given up on trying to keep any kind of real continuity or story. Because the continuity for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre goes all over the place. But this one was kind of interesting because I really enjoyed it for a lot of the reasons that it's getting criticised for. Because there's essentially
they're killing off survivors in the new version, aren't they? From what I've been told.
One of the characters is one of the characters who's effectively the final girl is a survivor of a school shooting, and they introduce it in such an offhand way where she just goes, "Oh, this is just like when I was in that school shooting."
Oh my god!
And it's absolutely awful. And she doesn't like guns for that reason. And her story arc is effectively she's just got to get over a post equivalent to Sandy Hook school shooting thing,
right?
And ditch her flipping neoliberal cock flipping ways and pick up the strap, embrace the spirit of Texas and start shooting.
My God.
I honestly, I just think that's just intrinsically hilarious because there's been there's been an incredible amount of people moving into Texas, and it's mostly to do with over the lockdown, and it's a lot of these Silicon Valley tech people and people who are going because Joe Rogan went and they think they can make it as a comedian and they want to go on Kill Tony, and there's people who are moving into Austin, and all these people these sort of West Coast elite type liberals that sort of ask left wing, but you're also moving to the state that's trying to make abortion illegal. Because, it's if you kill a baby in a womb, it's not a moving target. That's cheating. You've got to wait for it to be born, grow up a bit, turn trans, and then you can start shooting at it. But, so it's kind of interesting, to realise that. People were saying, oh, it's so typical. They're bringing in all these characters that are TikTok influencers. Oh, it's such an obvious pandering thing. But that has been something that has been happening in Texas.
Yeah.
That's something those people are going there. So I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, back to the very first one, it's about that these city people don't understand the ways of the country, that kind of folk horror thing, about going into an area with you're not familiar and being confronted with the locals and seeing that's interesting to me. It's
a bit like back in the day when I moved to Kidderminster.
Oh God.
It's very much the same thing, the big-eyed boys and the people limping and what have you. Sorry to anybody in Kidderminster.
Yeah.
Although the Kidderminster Chainsaw Massacre wouldn't be such a great movie.
I don't know. I'm just quickly racking my brain for if I know anyone in Kidderminster. Don't off the top of my head. I think we'll be all right. But if you're from Kidderminster, big up anyway. But yeah, I mean, Like, and that's what the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was about. It was about these kids going into somewhere where they shouldn't. Like, every character in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre goes into the house where they don't live of their own free will.
Right.
They walk into the trouble. And this is like after they've had an incident with this hitchhiker. Incredible scene where they picked up this hitchhiker who's this terrifying guy, like, who's asking to be driven home, like, so they know that he's kind of from around there, like, and they should have taken that as a hint and like kind of like tried to avoid the area altogether, but they didn't. And that's when they happen across the family, like. Yes, and like we're introduced to the iconic Leatherface, like, and like it says right at the start of it, this is based on a true story, even though it explicitly isn't. Like, I mean, like, it was influenced by Ed Gein, which obviously took place in Wisconsin. But how it's been described since is that Tobe Hooper didn't really know Ed Gein like that. So it was the urban legend tales of what he'd heard about the story.
Right.
Like, because, like, you know, people didn't necessarily, like, have access to, like, good information, but they would hear about a story about this guy in Wisconsin. They went into his flat and they saw lampshades made out of skin.
Yeah.
And all this kind of thing. And, like, so, like, as those urban legends develop, I mean, we say urban legends, he did exist, and these things.
No, but of
happen.
course it was all passed on like Chinese whispers, really, in those days, wasn't it?
Yeah, things become more elaborated. So by the time it gets from Wisconsin to Texas, you know, flipping, the story he's probably hearing is probably something a lot closer to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense, doesn't it? Whereas these days, Ed Gein would be streaming on 24-hour news for a week.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, we'd all know we'd know his shoe size, the lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely everything. Like, so I thought it's kind of interesting on how, like, you know, it says it's based on a true story, and it isn't based on a true story, but it also kind of is based on a true story. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
yeah. I think it's one of the most like, it's a very evocative film. Like, you feel sweaty watching it. And like, I've read so many stories because, like, it was a very low budget production, and so they used like real skeletons, because buying real skeletons from India is cheaper, and, like, you know, using actual meat is a lot cheaper than convincing fakes. So you're out there in this Texas heat with all these, like,
being slapped with a chop.
Yeah. Just actual stinking
Wow.
rotten meat, like.
And there is, I mean, with all of the across the whole genre of exploitation, it's the darkness and the scuzziness and the filth that's part of the appeal of it, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, I mean, like, you know, whether it is Texas Chainsaw Massacre or if it is the dirty streets of New York during the bin strike, you know.
Yeah, or even an area like Harlem, neglected by the authorities for decades, you know, and collapsing in on itself.
This is it. Like, I mean, like, these are not only, like, the settings for these films, these are also kind of like the environments that where the people that these films were trying to speak to were existing. And, like, that's something, like, you know, it's like that these lower budget films are, like, providing something that speaks directly to communities that hasn't been addressed by Hollywood. Like,
it is,
I mean, like if Hollywood had made Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like, you know, I mean, admittedly, you know, the portrayal of family's grim, but it does feel, at least in some way, like a bit authentic. They're not cartoon hillbillies, you know.
No, absolutely, and you know, if you're reflecting people's environment back to them, you're going to get more people to come and see that film, and they almost become folk tales.
Yeah.
You know, and I know we've said that a lot of the tropes are repeated over and over again in different kinds of exploitation movies, but you're reflecting people's lives back to them in a certain extent in the way that the big studios never could.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, you know, as a magician who tortures women with my vertically challenged assistant. Blood-sucking freaks speak to that because I do torture a lot of... I don't. I just thought that'd be a funny bit, right on a bit too long, and when you haven't got an audience to start laughing in front of you,
well,
the bit can go a bit too far. So I'm gonna park that one there. But yeah,
I'm just relieved I didn't bring my pimp stick with me today.
Oh my days.
With the big shiny top.
Oh my days. Yeah.
So I mean, from the we've gone through a few films between us. From that whole genre on your side of the horror, the exploitation, what's your number one recommendation for people to pick up and watch if they've not been near that genre before?
I don't know. I'd say probably the best is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'd say what ones have I been through? I'd say like I'd say Blood-Sucking Freaks is the one to check out to just see that cinema like that exists.
How far it can go.
I
suppose.
Yeah, I mean, like it's not particularly brutal. The effects aren't particularly good. They don't hold up by modern standards and that. But it's an art piece. It's evocative.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's about the colours. Like, the blood doesn't look realistic in that, but it does look good.
Yes.
And sometimes creating what should we call it? Sometimes painting a picture needs to be more about like looking good and being evocative than it has to be about reflecting reality. And I think Blood-Sucking Freaks is one you can check that. I'm not sure if it's on any streaming services at the minute, but I do know you can check the 88 Films Blu-ray is a fantastic copy of it. It's also got a great commentary by Eli Roth, who I learnt a fair bit from this film about I think I've watched that film with the commentary twice, and I don't think I've ever watched any commentary twice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's good. I mean, somebody like Eli Roth who's steeped in all of that stuff, isn't he, before he started his career?
Very much so, yeah. So, like, as a closer, like, what would your one, like, if you're going to give them one recommendation, if you're not going to check out all these films, but, like, you just want to check out one thing that sort of sums it all up, what would that be?
I'd have to say the first one I picked today, which was Coffee with Pam Grier. Because although the films she made after that was Foxy Brown and Friday Foster were in that kind of little run of films.
I've never seen Friday Foster, but Foxy Brown in particular, banger.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Hill, who directed both Foxy Brown and Coffee, I told you briefly about this in the week. Jack Hill, the director, emailed me. He must have searched his name online. And when I was running the blog, he sent me this email basically saying, I get that you understand where we were coming from with these, what we were trying to achieve. It's amazing to find somebody in this day and age that's picked up on this and, you know, keep it up. So I'd have to pick a Jack Hill film. The idea with Foxy Brown was they were ironing out the creases from Coffee. Yeah. But of course the creases are half the appeal. Coffee's like the raw original. Yeah, and with Friday Foster, if it wasn't for the whores and the drugs, you could show it your kids. Yeah. You know, that's the where they got to with that. So where is it? I'll get it out again, show you. That's it. Like, you know, at that point, like, you know, as they're getting better at making films, it's also like, you know, they're kind of becoming more mainstream with that intention, so you do lose the edges. Definitely. So if you want the scuzz and the low lifeness of it all, Coffee's my recommendation. Excellent. Well, I reckon we can pretty much call that one a pod there. Like, before I go, is there anything you want people to get eyes on? Is there, do you want to get, is there any socials? Are you doing socials at the minute? Do you know what? I know I barely leave the house these days, my friend. I'm pretty much retired. You can probably see me Christmas Eve at Artichoke in Chester. But I mean, as for the broadcasting stuff, no, these days I'm a DIY freak at home. I'm painting windowsills rather than broadcasting these days. Ace, well, I'm delighted I could get you out of retirement for this. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I know. Maybe we'll have you back. Like, maybe we'll try and think of another subject. Love to. Excellent stuff. Okay. I'm Kinell. This has been Sinister Cinema. Thank you very much to my guest, Parsley. That's one of them. We finally got to the end of the episode without the camera buggering up. Hey! Yes! Peace. Bye.